This week's Haftarah is the entire book of the prophet Ovadiah. An entire book. All 21 verses of it. It's the shortest of the books of the Hebrew Bible, the shortest of the minor prophets in our Tanakh. So you can read an entire book of the Bible if you will crack open your Tanakh and read Ovadiah, and you'll be fulfilling the mitzvah of studying the Haftarah for this week. The book tells about the ultimate divine judgment on the Edomites. Edom is the land area, the Edomites, the people whose forefather is Esau, Jacob's brother. And though in this week's Parsha they have somewhat of a reconciliation, there is an ultimate judgment because the Edomites help the Babylonians sack Jerusalem and carry off all the Jews' wealth. One day, that day of the Lord, Yom Hahu, God will sit in divine judgment and exactly the kind of justice that's necessary. When you thought, Edomites, God will say, when you thought that you were as high as the eagle, when you thought that you were lodged among the stars, then you will learn your lesson for having really oppressed my people and allied yourselves with the tyrannical empire builders, the Babylonians, who razed Jerusalem. This kind of ultimate day of justice will be a day upon which God will sit in the throne of Din. Din being that aspect of God that administers strict justice. And according to the Talmud, God waits for that day and that day alone to exercise the strict adjudication, the stricter sense of justice that God demands of the peoples of the world. Of course, God has a little bit of the power of judgment to use every day, just like we as humans who are created in the image of God have a power of judgment that sometimes helps us discern choices, left, right, for better, for worse. But the Gemara says, the Midrash says, God moves from the throne of strict justice to the seat of rachamim, to the seat of deep compassion on a daily basis. And so the prophet says that on that day alone, we can take some comfort. God will exact the strict justice of the Lord. Otherwise, too much strict justice would be applied, both to the peoples of the earth and to the Jewish people. This allows us to appreciate our free agency. We might work towards being able to relate to each other in more peaceful ways. We might think as peoples could, not to align ourselves or ally ourselves with those who are pursuing paths of destruction and takeover. The prophet's warning is, be careful with whom you really link arms. Be careful with whom you make alliances. And that not only goes for the Edomites regarding their connection to the Babylonians. At this time of year, that it helps us reflect on some of our own past mistakes as a Jewish people. How so? Interestingly, we know that the Romans were the ones who destroyed the second temple. Ironically, it was the Maccabeans who created the first alliance with the Roman Empire. And then the Hasmonean kings, that Hasmonean era of leadership, 167 BCE through the turn of the millennium. that was truly allied and in league with the ever becoming Roman oppressors. Careful with whom you create the alliance. Careful with whom you really enter into the relationship with. This is a message for Hanukkah as important as the message of our being able to claim for ourselves the space and places of Jewish culture and religious rights that we know we must continue to commit ourselves and our people to. There's a powerful message in the book of Ovadiah for Jews of all times to examine more closely the kinds of ties and relations and alliances that we'll enter into. For that matter, the book of Ovadiah was the only one to mention the diaspora in the lands of Sfarad, in Spain. Whichever and however many Jewish community, however many Jews were in the Iberian Peninsula at the time of the writing of the book of Ovadiah, the prophet turns and says, you will have these kinds of challenges both when you are in the land with kingdoms of your own, in the land of Canaan, in the ancient land of Israel, and you will have these kinds of challenges when you exist and create community and become part of the populations of the world, far from the central temple of Jerusalem. For the diaspora and for the Jews who would be the community of our homeland. Be careful. Be careful, Ovadiah says, for you never know who really makes for the right alliance and who really is going to ultimately be judged by God as having made themselves too much like the tyrants that Babylon and ultimately the Edomites represent. Worth reading. All 21 verses, the entire book. Can feel so good. You can finish an entire book of the Tanakh in one sitting. So, Book of Ovadiah, this week's Haftarah for Parshat Vayishlah. Shabbat Shalom.